There's an interesting halacha brought in Hilchos Rosh Hashana regarding Aseret Tshuva. The halacha brought in the Shulchan Aruch is in Siman Tov Reish Gimel. It's a siman dedicated just for this halacha. The halacha is that during Aseret Tshuva, even a person who is not careful to eat only Pas Yisroel during the entire year, he should be careful during the Aseret Tshuva to eat only Pas Yisroel as opposed to Pas Akum. There are a couple things interesting about this halacha. Number one, we know that, of course, the Aseret Tshuva is a time set aside for us to do Tshuva. So why is there a halacha that a person should do something only for the specific time of the Aseret Tshuva? The halacha is not that a person should be makpid on Pas Yisroel for the rest of the year. Rather, the halacha is that a person should be careful with Pas Yisroel only during the Aseret Tshuva. What kind of tshuva is that if the person is not going to continue doing that good thing after the Aseret Tshuva, and if he's only going to be doing it during the Aseret Tshuva? What kind of tshuva is that? Number two, why is the halacha specifically for this inyan of Pas Yisroel and not the Pas Akum? Why is there a halacha to be careful with this specific thing? There are many other things we can be careful with. Lashon Hara, Shabbos, comes out one day during Aseret Tshuva, but davening, why specifically Pas Yisroel and Pas Akum? So Rav Matis Blum, in his Sefer Torah L'das, gives an explanation for this halacha. He says that we know there are certain places in the world that have more kedusha than others. For example, the Beis Hamikdash, a shul, a kever. These are places that people go first, and they know there's special kedusha there. You could daven in these places, and your tefillos may be answered more quickly than if you would daven in a place of less kedusha. In the same way, there are times during the year that have more kedusha than other times during the year. And there are times that Hashem is closer to us, so to speak, and we're closer to Hashem. And specifically, the Aseret Tshuva is one of those times where it is a time that is set specifically aside for doing Tshuva. As we know, Hashem is closer to us during these times of the Aseret Tshuva. As such, this halacha of being makpid on Pas Yisroel and not Pas Akum is not as much an idea that we're trying to improve ourselves and do tshuva in this area. Rather, it is the idea that it is a signal for us to remind ourselves that this time is different than the rest of the times during the year. He gives a mashal, and for example, if a king would come to town and he would have a parade and you would be going outside and you'd be close to the king during that parade, you might dress differently during that time. Or if the king comes to your house, of course you would dress differently and you would act differently during that time. Even though we know that after that time, you're going to change into your regular clothes and you're going to go back to your regular behavior. But when the king is close to you, you behave differently. That's the same thing with Aseret Tshuva. Hashem, the King of all kings, is close to us during this time. As we know, the pasuk of Dirshu Hashem B'himatzo, Karuba Yosod Karov, is referring to the Aseret Tshuva. Hashem is closer to us during this time. So the idea of being makpid on this halacha of Pas Yisroel during this time is not that we're doing tshuva and we're improving ourselves in this area. Rather, the halacha is that we should remind ourselves and act differently during these times and go above and beyond and do something that's a chumrah that you don't have to do during the year. But since we know Hashem is closer to us during this time, we must act differently. And that's a signal to us to remind ourselves that the Aseret Tshuva is this special time where Hashem is close to us and we have to do tshuva. It's really a springboard to doing tshuva. It's a reminder to us to act differently during this time. And to address the point of why specifically this halacha of Pas Yisrael, Rav Blum explains as follows. Number one, Pas Yisrael is a halacha in lechem, in bread. Bread is a source life for us. So too, we have to remind ourselves that our spiritual source life, our life of the Torah and Hashem, during this time must be improved as well. Not just our physical bread, but our spiritual bread as well. Additionally, it's a halacha of something that differentiates us and the Goyim. So we have to remind ourselves during this time that we're close to Hashem on a different level, besides the fact that it's Aseres Tshuva. We're the Am Segula, we're the Am HaNivchar, we're Klal Yisrael, we're different than the rest of the world. And even more so during the time of the Aseres Tshuva, we need to remind ourselves of that and make ourselves closer to Hashem by doing Tshuva. And finally, he explains that, he brings the Rambam that says that Tshuva, when it's done with Tzibur, when the Tzibur comes together, and the congregation comes together to daven to Hashem and do Tshuva, then that's a special time where Hashem will accept our Tshuva, any time during the year. When a Yachid, when a individual comes, he needs the help of the Aseres Tshuva to really get that extra boost, to be closer to Hashem, for his Tshuva to be accepted. And the halacha of Pas Yisrael is a halacha that the reason Chazal did not enact it for Klal Yisrael, and it's just a chumrah, is specifically because Chazal said it's a gzera that Rov HaTzibur is not able to accept on themselves. It's something that only Yechidim can accept, individuals, but it's not something that the entire congregation, the entire populace can handle. So this is a halacha that we're taking upon ourselves during this time of the Aseres Tshuva to remind ourselves that we're doing a halacha of something that applies only to Yechidim, because during this time it's the Yechidim, the individuals, who need to remind themselves that we have to do Tshuva and do introspection on our own individual lives, because the Aseres Tshuva is a time where Hashem is closer to us, and it's a time where we can take advantage of this. And as Yechidim, even as individuals, we have this extra boost where Hashem is closer to us and we're closer to Hashem. So that's what this halacha of being makbid on Pas Yisrael during Aseres Tshuva is all about. It's a reminder to us that this time is different than the rest of the year. It is a reminder to us to change our spiritual bread, not only our physical bread, but our spiritual life as well. And number three, it is something to remind us that as individuals, this time of the year, that Aseres Tshuva is a time that is set aside for Tshuva, since Hashem is closer to us during this time. May we all take advantage of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur and all the Aseres Tshuva, and may we be all Bizocha and Din, and have a Ksiva, Chasima Tova, and a good Ben Shtiyar.